Welcome to the VisualEyes workshop. My name is Mona Ilayan, and I'll be presenting this introductory session. This tutorial will closely follow the tutorial instructions provided by VisualEyes, in addition to the examples supplied regarding creating Greenwich Tea Party in New Jersey during the American Revolution. The VisualEyes tutorial is comprehensive and easy to follow, and I enjoyed every bit of it when I was following along. Before we begin, I always like to go through our learning objectives. So what I would like for you to take away from this workshop is to develop an understanding of VisualEyes. What is it? What are the system requirements and the pros and cons of using VisualEyes? We'll explore its back-end tools, menus, and distinguished features. The session is based on practical experimentation with the tool. I think the best way to learn a tool is to apply the tool. What is VisualEyes? VisualEyes was developed at the University of Virginia as a web-based authoring tool to incorporate images, maps, charts, videos, and data into an interactive and dynamic display of information. The project was initiated at the Virginia Center for Digital History, and it's currently freely available for academic and nonprofit use. Personally, I think it's an exceptional tool that offers a creative and intelligent visualization of information. The purpose of this tool was to allow scholars to present primary sources and research findings using a hands-on and interactive tool that promotes inquiry and active learning. The tool allows users to use various types of resources in traditional and multimedia formats and animate it with charts and timelines. What are the system requirements for VisualEyes? Since it's a web-based tool, you'll need internet access to the VisEdit tool. I've supplied a link to this tool down here. What are the pros and cons of using VisualEyes? The pros are that it's free, easy to use because they provide clear documentation and tutorial manuals. It engages the creator and the user in knowledge creation and inquiry. The cons are that it can't be downloaded. All information is stored on the Virginia servers, and it may require some knowledge of coding if you get into creating complicated visualizations. What's amazing is that they provide reference manuals to help with that as well. How would you access VisualEyes? Since it's web-based, you can create a dynamic VisualEyes session, preview, and save your work in VisEdit tool found at www.viseyes.org/edit.htm. When you visit this site, you don't necessarily need to create a username and password. If you would like to continue as a guest, you can just click Login. However, your work will not be saved, and if the web browser freezes or it unexpectedly shuts down, you will lose all your work. To create an account, click on the link below the University of Virginia logo where it says, "Click here to create a new account." All of these fields are mandatory except for the school field, so go ahead and complete that. Once you've submitted that form, go back to the VisEdit window and enter your username and password instead of the default guest and password in the login screen. Let's explore VisEdit for a while. VisEdit is a browser-based interface. It is here that you begin building your VisualEyes projects. It relies on XML coding, but it saves you the trouble of having to code yourself, for the most part. VisEdit main screen is called the main tree view. If you click on the drop-down menu in the bottom right, you can change the view to XML code. This screen is divided into 4 frames or panels. The element tree. In the element tree, you will get a quick definition of elements. They are considered the building blocks in VisualEyes, and they are connected together to design a project. The element tree shows all the elements available and used by your project. There's a drop-down menu at the bottom left, directly below this frame, that allows you to add or delete elements. Then there's the Attributes panel. They are used to assign or format your elements so as to look and do what you would like them to do. It'll become more obvious once we get started on the hands-on portion of this workshop how the attributes functions. This frame is very much like an editor. It displays the attributes and values of elements, and it's where you can go ahead and modify or delete these values. You also have the info screen, or script editor. This offers instructional tips that relate to the selected items in your attribute panel. This space is also used to edit glue scripts and text displays. We'll talk about glue soon. The last frame is the wizard list, and you can click here to use a wizard that walks you through the creation of certain elements. Let's quickly look at our VisEdit menu bar. The menu bar has the following menus: File, Edit, Tools, and Show. In the File menu, you are given the following options: New, to start a new project; Load project. You can load saved projects by simply double-clicking on the project name in the info screen. Load by ID. You'll notice that every project has a unique ID that is generated upon saving the project. The ID is displayed in the info screen. If you remember the ID, you can load the project using this option. Save saves your project. Save as saves a new version of the project. Save version allows you to save different versions of the same project under the same project name. Preview demos a display of your project without saving the changes. The Edit menu has the following options: Undo or redo. You can undo and redo actions. If you decide to undo a lot of changes, redo will only redo the most recent undo. There's also Copy and Paste, which is similar to editing a document. You can simply copy and paste. Instead of words and phrases, you can copy and paste elements. The Move Up and Down allows you to control the element's position in the element tree by either moving them up or down. You can also change the attribute position as well. The element and any elements contained within it will move up and down in the tree, remaining on its same level of the tree. The Tools menu offers options to convert your project data to an XML file or upload data from your local computer in CSV, KML, and XML formats. The Show menu is where you can see all your data files, sample projects, the manual for views, and access to VisualEyes Q&A. Let's get started by creating a view. Now that you have your own account and you have a basic understanding of what the VisEdit tools do and its main menu bar, let's get started on the Greenwich Tea Party SNJ during the American Revolution project. First thing we're going to do is change our view element. And the view element is the tab where we will show a map of New Jersey. Click the New Project folder that appears in your element tree to show its sub-elements. Select View My View. Then in the Attributes editor, look for the title tag. You can change the title tag value to Greenwich Tea Party. Then click the Save and Preview button to see what you've changed. You'll notice that the tab is too small to display the whole title. We will have to return to editing and change the attributes for our tab. So go ahead and click Return to Editing button at the top. In the element tree, select the tab Sub-element. Then you'll notice the info screen will display a number of preset attributes, and one of the attributes that is important to us at this point in time is the Width attribute. In the drop-down menu above the info screen label, Add New Attribute, search for Width. The attribute will now appear in the attribute window, and here we will set it to a value of 210 pixels. Let's click Save and Preview and see how that looks in our view. How to create a new view. Each tab represents a view. Let's add another one, and there are two ways to add a new view. One way is by using the wizard to help us. The other way is using the drop-down menu at the bottom labeled Add New Element. To create a new view using the wizard list, the first thing we need to do is select the project folder in the element tree. And in your wizard window, you'll notice a Add New View option. Go ahead and select that. The wizard will run through the options with you and provide you with helpful instructions in the info window. To begin, click the Next Step button. As you provide a value for each attribute, click Next Step to move on to the next step until everything is complete. Let's add a title. I'll call this view Second View. There are only 2 steps to this wizard, and they're very simple to follow. Enter a title for the view and click Add. To create a new view using Add New Element drop-down menu, the first thing you need to do is select your project folder in the Element Tree view. And from the drop-down menu at the bottom labeled Add New Element, select View. Now let's learn how to delete a view. It's very easy to delete elements in the element tree. Let's go ahead and do that. Click on the view you just created in the element tree and then click Remove at the bottom of the element tree. Make sure when you're deleting elements that you are deleting the correct element, because once it's gone, you lose all resources attached to the element. I created 2 additional views, so I'm going to remove one of them. How to save the project. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and save the project so we don't lose any of our work so far. Now that you're familiar with the menu options, you know that you will need to go to the File menu, select Save As, and give the project a title. If you ever need to reload a saved project again, you can always log in and go to the File menu, then click Select Load Project. All your projects will appear in the info screen, where you can double-click to open one. You'll notice that you also have an option to delete a complete project here too. Make sure you are certain about deleting a project because once deleted, it cannot be restored. To safeguard from mistakes like deleting elements, the best thing to do is to save different versions of your work. Let's go ahead and add a map. So to resume our project, we're going to use a historical map of southern New Jersey supplied by the University of Virginia tutorial to practice inserting it into our view we've just created. The first thing you want to do is select the view you would like to add the image to. I have 2 views, so I'm going to go with the Greenwich Tea Party view. Upon selecting the view, the wizard window gives you a list of options. Search for the image option. Click Image. The wizard will walk you through the steps to add the image to your view. Click Next Step to continue. Enter an ID. Use a short and descriptive name that identifies this object. Click Next. Enter the URL for the image. In my case, it's www.viseyes.org/sampler/njsouth.jpg. Notice that the image source needs to be online. You can't upload an image to the server. As long as you have the URL for the image, you can use it in VisualEyes. Make sure to avoid copyright violations. When all is cleared, then click Next Step. In this step, you will be adding glue. So let's pause for a few minutes here so I can briefly explain how glue works. Glue is a script used to identify external sources that are added to any project. GLUE stands for General Language to Unite Events. It's an element in VisEdit, and it is vital to creating interactive visualizations because they make images and other sources show up on the screen automatically, and they display information in tables, pop-up windows, and map formats. The technical aspect of glue is not necessary for this introductory session. Just remember that you need to give glue an ID name and use it to display your map image in your view. Let's go ahead and continue adding our map. Now going back to adding our glue, let's go ahead and click Next Step. Since we want the image to appear upon initializing the view, we are going to leave this flag as true. Then click Next Step. Give your glue an ID. Then click Next Step. Then click Add. You'll notice your view in the element tree changes to a folder. If you expand the folder, you'll notice the sub-elements, image, and glue. Finally, to save and review what you've done, let's just click Save and Preview button. Note in each step you are adding XML code using this user-friendly interface. If you're not comfortable editing XML, I recommend you continue adding and editing elements in the main tree view screen. Since the image is larger than our view canvas, you can click and drag the map around. Let's add an ability to zoom in and out as we would in Google Maps. We can do that by adding an element to the element tree. Since we're adding this element into our view, first we will select View, Greenwich Tea Party. Use the wizard list to select Zoom control. Again, the wizard will walk us through the steps to add the zoom control. Click Next Step. You can choose to position your zoom control anywhere on the screen. The positioning is relative to the top left corner, so you can change the left pixel number to whatever you like. I'm going to leave it as it is in the default values. The larger the number, the further away from the left the zoom control will be. Click Next Step. Again, you can type the top position as well. I'm going to leave the default value. Then click Next. We could add a magnifier, but for now, we are not going to do that. Click Next Step, then click Add. Click Save and Preview to check out how nifty your map looks. Let's also add a timeline to our map. Right now, there doesn't seem to be a point for the timeline, but we are going to use it in a dynamic way very soon for this project. So let's start first by adding that timeline. Since we're adding another feature to the view, we'll have to select View, Greenwich Tea Party folder. And from the wizard list, we're going to click Timeline. As always, the wizard will walk us through the process of adding an element. There are 12 steps to adding the timeline. Now click Next Step to begin adding it. Now type starting date. I'm going to enter 12/22/1774 for December 22nd, 1774, which is the date of the Greenwich Tea Party. This is the time when patriots seize in a ship of British tea from a local loyalist and publicly burn it. All of this happens in Greenwich, in New Jersey. This conflict is one of the first between patriots and the British authorities. Now that I have my initial date, click Next Step. In this step, I'm going to type the end date as 04/02/1783 for April 2nd, 1783. And this is when Captain Stewart shot the notorious Loyalist Captain Bacon near Tuckerton. It was seen as the last encounter in New Jersey. Click Next Step. Then we're going to accept the default controls feature because we want the dates to appear below the timeline bar. We'll keep it at 8 pixels, the length of each tick on the bar. Then we'll accept the formatting options for the bar, its width, its height, its left and top positions, and the color it will be displayed in. Then click Add. Okay, let's see what we've got. And most importantly, click Save and Preview. To modify the timeline, we can add Show Minor and Major Ticks. The timeline in its default format looks alright, but let's modify some attributes of the timeline so it is customized to our specific needs. For example, let's have it show us the small ticks in the timeline that represent in-between dates, for example. Expand the view, Greenwich Tea Party folder, select Timeline. In the Add New attribute, select Minor Tick. Set its value to 5 pixels. So let's go ahead and modify the Show Minor Values. Click on the Add New Attributes, scroll to Show Minor Values, set it to True. Then click Save and Preview to save your work and preview what you've done so far. Your timeline now appears as soon as you load the page. You can view major and minor timeline ticks, as well as the dates they're representing. Now let's modify the timeline date format. Again, expand your view folder, select the timeline element, then click on the Add New attribute. Select Date Format, and choose another format that you like best from the drop-down menu. But really, the timeline isn't doing much except displaying the date. The next thing we want to do in this project is to use the dynamic aspects of our timeline. And to do that, we want to be able to trace the movement of the American troops during the Revolutionary War in the south of New Jersey. We can do that by creating paths and dots. The first thing we'll do is we'll create a simple path, then we'll link the path to our timeline. To create a simple path, let's click on the View Greenwich Tea Party folder again, because this is the view we would like to modify with another element. So now we're going to select the path element from the wizard list. This will initiate the wizard. Click Next, enter a unique ID for this path. Click Next and accept the default settings, or you can choose to change the path color, the width of the path line, having lines between dots, adding the first dot to the path, choosing the dot style, dot size, and adding the second dot. Next, you'll be prompted to add the glue that will display these dots and paths. Next, you'll enter a unique glue ID. Then click Add. So if you click Save and Preview, you will see the path is drawn between two dots, but it's quite random and meaningless. Let's give it meaning. What we want to do is actually place the dots where a battle occurred in South New Jersey. So remember, we're modifying your view, and specifically its sub-element path, path Tea Party NJ. So we're going to expand the path to view the two random dots created. Click the first dot and change its X and Y coordinates in the attribute editor. For the first dot, I'm going to use the values X equals 585 and for Y, 790. I'm going to change the ID to Greenwich. If the ID attribute does not appear in the attribute editor, just add the ID attribute from the Add New Attribute in the drop-down menu. Now to create our dynamic timeline, we need to examine how it's currently working. For the first dot, the time attribute is set to 0, and the second dot to 1. When we run the timeline, it displays the dots at the time beginning at 0 as we play our timeline. It draws the path, then ends at the second dot, which is at time 1. But we want our path to be controlled by the date and not by our time. So first, I'm going to remove the time attribute in the attribute editor. Then I'm going to add a date attribute and set it to 12/22/1774. Note that you should enter the date in the same format. So now we have two dots, but let's add more dots. So the easiest way to add more dots is to select the second dot, then go to the Edit menu, select Copy, then go to the Edit menu again and select Paste. Let's add an additional 6 dots and make sure that they're following the same format. I'm going to go ahead and use this table. That is part of the University of Virginia VisualEyes tutorial with the X and Y coordinates and the date. Note, sometimes the Y coordinate is a bit glitchy. You may have to click on another dot, then go back and check the Y coordinate and check if it's entered correctly. Sometimes it reverts back to its original value. Once you're done, click Save and Preview. If you play the timeline, you'll notice your path is now drawn based on the dates. That displays a more meaningful path. Let's go ahead and add widgets. Let's start with a magnifier. What's cool about VisualEyes is that you can add widgets to your projects to enhance their capability. For your view, the wizard panel lists a number of features. I'm going to add a magnifier widget for accessibility purposes. So to do that, we first select our view, Greenwich Tea Party, then select the magnifier from the wizard list. And again, the wizard will walk you through the instructions to set it up. As with all sub-elements, you have to state an ID. Click Next Step. Since we're trying to magnify the image in our view, we will go ahead and enter the URL for that image. But you can add any other image and it will overlay the original. It could be black and white image of the same map, or it could have other details. But that's definitely a design choice for you to make. Select a zoom factor, click Next Step, then format its position from the left and top. Then format its width and height. Choose a color, add the glue so that your magnifier appears on the screen as soon as you load your view, and set it to true. Give it an ID. Once you've completed these steps, click the Save and Preview button to see how you've modified your project. Notice it only magnifies the original image and none of the other features, such as the dots, path, or any other widgets. Adding a control panel. Looking at the map for our project, we can instantly see that it's starting to get a bit messy. What we could do is add a control panel that will allow us to show or hide widgets. The first thing we need to do is to create the panel. Again, we select the View Greenwich Tea Party, select Control Panel from the wizard list, then follow the wizard instructions. Go ahead and use the default settings. Make sure you give it a title, and then click Add to complete the setup. How to add an element to the control panel. The point of creating the control panel is to help us clean up the space in our views. So far, the control panel doesn't have any items in it to control. To add our magnifier element into the control panel, where we can switch between showing and hiding, means we have to somehow link the two. First, we'll select our control panel, then we're going to select Item from the Add New Element drop-down menu. In the Attribute Editor, enter the menu options Show Magnifier for the title, then select Checkbox from the menu. You can select anything else. Now we have to add the glue. The glue is really important for managing our display. So with the item sub-element still selected, click on the Add New Attribute drop-down menu and look for glue. In the drop-down menu that appears in the Attribute Editor, under the Choices column, select the ID you've created for your magnifier. Then click Save and Preview. You will see your control panel shows up with a checkbox. If you click the box, you can show or hide the magnifier as desired. This was just a brief overview of what VisualEyes can do. You might need to get your hands dirty and code a little, but the tool has some really powerful potentials. I've added some resources here that you might like to check out. This was sponsored by the University of Toronto Scarborough and its library, Ryerson University, Brock University, and this research was supported by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. A special thanks goes to Ryerson for hosting Day 3 of the conference, Center for Digital Humanities, Ryerson University Library and Archives, the Director of E-Learning, the Learning and Teaching Office, the Office of the Dean, Faculty of Arts, the Department of English and its MA Literatures of Modernity program, and the Master of Digital Media program for donations of financial support. The Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Brock University, for a contribution of financial support towards the conference, as well as contributing to planning. Victoria Owen, Chief Librarian at the University of Toronto Scarborough, for her generous financial support and staff resources. Shirk Connections grant, without which none of the wonderful research and discussions generated here would be possible.